PEMCAST.
Hello everyone, welcome to PEMCAST. My name is Daniel, I'll be your host today, and I am joined by Jen.
Hi everyone, I'm Jen.
Yeah, so Jen is a college senior. She's an Emmaus leader. You may have seen her in one of the 20 billion things she does for our church.
Yes.
She's in AV, she does Pem Kids, Pem Photos, PYC. Is there anything else I'm missing?
Pem Media.
Pem Media.
A whole bunch of everything but worship. Yeah.
Everything but worship.
I cannot sing.
Yeah, how did you kind of get into like so many things?
P. Danny, he sucked me in. So yeah, I feel like it just was a buildup of one thing. Oh, you want to try this out? Oh, how about this? And the next thing you know, it was very gradual.
Yeah.
So
you're super involved in the church. So I think today we're going to spend a little time talking about how you kind of got plugged into PEM, plugged into Christianity, how your relationship with God started.
Yeah.
So why don't we just jump right into it?
of course.
Yeah. So did you have a relationship with God when you were a kid or when you were younger? Did you grow up in the church?
So I guess maybe if you want to count it, but for the most part, all I vaguely remember is like elementary school, going to church just because my mom, she was like single at that time, so she just needed some babysitters and like a new community. So that was the main point of going and doing things like Korean school, which I never retained any information from it. And things like vague memories of VBS and like having fun. For me, I for sure did not know what I was learning or retaining or like, I remember like a PEM Kids, one of their sermons, I started reciting the Lord's Prayer. Then all of a sudden I started saying it back and I had no idea it was in my head. It like unlocked a memory in my head. It was opened
buried
up.
in the back, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe that's the only thing I learned from elementary school.
You learned the Lord's Prayer.
But for the most part, I moved to Bergen, and for middle school and high school was very much atheist. Yeah.
Where did you live while you were in elementary school?
I was from Pine Brook, Montville, that area.
Sure, it's like
still like
north-ish Jersey.
but like not Bergen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not all the way.
Yeah, not all the way.
Sure.
So that was where I mainly grew up.
Yeah. So we talked a bit about how you grew up, like your elementary school, just kind of going to VBS a little bit, and then like we talked about your relationship with God, but how was your life in general, like with your family and just growing up in a non-Christian household, basically?
My mom, she like grew up Buddhist, then became Christian, checked out Catholic church.
Okay.
Even though she isn't Christian and still checking things out, she has, ironically, a lot of Christian values that she doesn't even know about. So like her being selfless. And I have a sister who's 10 years older than me. So she's my second mom. She's 31 now. And that's when I really looked up to them as like role models. And my dad really wasn't much in the picture. They got divorced when I was younger. And my mom actually got remarried, which is why I moved to Bergen in middle school. And that's pretty much like my life growing up, where it'd just be the two women in my household taking care of me as the youngest.
But would you say you had a good relationship with them? Yeah,
definitely. I think it was kind of hard though when I'm in like elementary school, middle school, and my sister's in college. So that's a lot of core memory. But I feel like my mom also, our relationship's pretty good. Especially growing up. But then I think my stepdad and I are still getting close.
Do you think the relationship with your family impacted kind of how you approached Christianity? Because I feel like that's true for a lot of people.
Yeah. Oh, they're like a huge part of my testimony.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, going into freshman year, I found out a lot of like bad things that my dad's done in the past.
Your dad or
my
your
biological dad?
Biological dad.
Yeah, that came to light end of my high school years. So then I went into college very bitter, very angry. And then I went on a trip with my sister, and that's where she told me more, because I feel like for her as the older sibling, it's so hard, where she was literally present, a full human being. And while she's trying to grow, she's still understanding what's going on. But for me, I was still a baby, so I'm very thankful for her. She really took it all, took most of the brutes. But yeah, so I feel like going into college, I was very hurt. And then after that trip, it didn't really help much either. But
What was your kind of like mental state, I guess, going
Yeah.
into college then?
I think I just wanted to have fun with all our friends, you know, classic college when your circle like expands by triple. So yeah, I think going into school, I feel like every time I thought about my dad, I was really angry, honestly, and like I was trying to cope. Yeah.
Just distracting yourself.
Yeah,
Get it out
just
there.
focusing on school, trying to figure my stuff out.
Yeah. Then how do you think, I guess, because this is also when you started coming out to church more. Yeah. How do you
Exactly.
think God spoke into this situation,
Yeah.
into this anger?
Yeah, so I think there was a PNP in January where I kind of like broke down, and it really hit at PEM where I started to realize that I shouldn't be so angry at my dad. And actually that was the first time I prayed for him, even though I didn't know how to pray, because like I first came out to Emmaus end of October and the PMP was in January. I remember very vividly in 2021 to 2022. And that's when I prayed for him, and I was praying that he was doing well. And I think like a sort of relief washed over me where I think I just let all that bitterness go. And I met with Esther Lee, P-Day's wife. And then she told me that although your earthly fathers may disappoint, your heavenly father won't. And that still like really sticks with me to this day. I don't think she knows how much it impacted me, but I feel like that really got me going. So yeah, I feel like with my biological dad, he'll never know, but he was a really big part of how I grew to God and how much I could rely on him and know I can rely on him through it all. Yeah.
How does I'm assuming you've talked about this with your sister.
Yeah.
How does she feel about like, is your sister Christian?
No, none of my
Oh,
family
hey, none of your
is.
family is Christian. Yeah. How did she feel about like, I guess your
Right.
like reflections and growth and transition?
Yeah, I feel like, so my sister, the reason she's not Christian is because she's been hurt by a lot of Christians, other Christians, and that's what's the hardest part. And like, I'm just like, why do they have to mess it up for her?
Why are Christians also sinners?
Exactly. So my stepdad, my mom, my sister, none of them are Christian. But when I first started going out to church, they're like, oh, okay. They more saw it as like an extracurricular. And especially knowing how committed I began to be, they were kind of nervous that it would like sidetrack me from my studies, my future, whatever the plans they wanted. So I feel like after telling them and them knowing, they respected it. But honestly, going to church in the beginning with my family was really hard because I did feel judged. There would be times when they're like, oh, can you like try praying for us? But I felt pretty like mocked, and I was like embarrassed. I was like, I'm not gonna pray out loud.
Yeah, I was like, oh, you're so Christian.
Yeah, I'm just like,
why don't you pray?
Yeah, so I was like, oh, but then now, thankfully, it's been like 3 years, more or less. So they're super accepting, and I think they're just letting me do my own thing. But yeah, like I always pray for them to like at least have a heart to maybe be open one day in the future.
Yeah. So what do you think was the moment that you decided that you wanted to like actually label yourself a Christian or be Christian or start a relationship with Jesus? Was it that PNP or?
That was, I don't know, it's kind of a hard question because it's not like a one
Yeah.
point.
Sure.
Yeah, I think, I got baptized a year later, in November of 2022, my sophomore year. But I feel like a big part would be missions. So after my freshman year, you know, Danny, go to Georgia missions, you know, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, that this was the first Georgia after COVID.
I think it was.
I'm pretty sure, yeah. And I remember my spring semester freshman year, Judy, she graduated, but she was saying, come join Penn Media. And I was like, oh, I was like really scared to join like any serving at that time. But I was like, this was Emmaus Media. And I was like really excited. And yeah, I think that was my first step in like having that heart to get more involved. But I think it was just like a big gradual. And then with Georgia, I love going to Georgia missions. But yeah, I feel like Georgia, the kids were a big testament. And ironically, at Georgia was when I realized that I thought I wanted to do education at one point instead of me studying PR right now.
Okay.
But I thought I wanted to be a teacher and I had a big heart for kids, and which is why I'm doing Penn Kids now. And at Georgia was when I kind of realized that I was open to church when I was in elementary school. Yeah, and I feel like that was also another big part of like how I became Christian, and like I was so grateful to God that He brought me back to church. And when I was a kid, I'm not gonna realize that, and I just remember all the fun moments. So that's why I think being a kid in the church is so lucky, and just having that exposure, like VBS and like kids bring their friends out and things like that. Like it's such a underrated, or it should be more. I feel like just every single kid, just to have fun, and like that's what connects kids together, and like that's what brought me to church. Like just having a fun time and like telling my mom I want to go out again, to all these little like, even if it was Korean school and I learned nothing. But yeah, I feel like knowing that God had a plan to bring me back, for me to be lost in that era of my life. But yeah, I think that just made me have such a different understanding of who God is. And that's when I was like, I think I want to devote the rest of it to God. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
And now you're paying it forward too. You're like getting involved with Pem Kids and stuff, right?
Even though they yell at me and they're just crazy sometimes, running around everywhere, I think even like as a PYC teacher, like I don't know where they're gonna end up, obviously, or like post-grad, and even the kids, definitely because like maybe parents are encouraging them to come out. But I do feel like a sense of peace knowing that God has a plan for them, hopefully bringing them to church, whether it's consistently or bringing them back. But yeah.
I'm curious, do you think that your like character or are there parts of your character or perspective on life that have changed after you became a Christian, after you like started really working on your relationship with God?
Oh yeah, I think so I had a weird sense of like trust in God, which is great.
Yeah, we love that.
But my biblical knowledge wasn't there. My foundation wasn't there. Like all these stories. I remember P. Danny was giving a PYC sermon about Cain and Abel. And I was like, who's Cain and Abel? But then people who grew up in church are like, oh, obviously, blah, blah, blah. So I feel like that was my hardest struggle of having people like knowing all these things. And like I felt really behind. And especially in Emmaus at that time, I was one of the, like now thankfully there's so many like people who are all different kind of walks. But at least the time when I started going out was a lot of people who just grew up in church, which is a whole nother struggle and journey also. But I do feel like I felt very alienated, and that it was still hard. It wasn't all like the sunshine and rainbows that it could seem like. Yeah. And I also became a leader sophomore year. So that was really hard to lead other members as someone trying to know who God is. Yeah.
What do you think were some of the specific struggles? Like, I know you mentioned the kind of like the lacking the knowledge, but like in general, like, I mean, all Christians know the path to pursue a relationship with God is wavy, it's rocky. Yeah. What do you think were some of the struggles?
So honestly, at first, it was all the sunshine. Like, at least in the beginning, I was like, this Christian thing's great.
A bit of a honeymoon period.
Well, maybe a little honeymoon phase, but I feel like over time, it's just, once again, like sitting with God, like EMP, 7 a.m. on Fridays. But I feel like those are the moments of me like being half sleepy, but also just sitting with God and trying to talk to Him. and trying to know what he has in. But yeah, my friends, I think, were the hardest things. My social circle who knew me before I met God.
Okay.
Yeah.
So your non-Christian friends.
Yeah, my non-Christian friends who I grew up with in high school, and just for them to understand my new values, the things I wanted in life, and for them to be like, "You're a church girl now?" I'm like,
Oh.
yeah. I think honestly that was like a big hard part, and yeah, and I do think me serving sophomore year was great, but a part of me also, obviously everything happened great, turned out the great way, but I do wonder what if I kept that time to kind of explore more, read more about the Bible. But I think I was really grateful to P. Danny, all the older leaders at that time who really helped guide me. And I feel like a big part was me. I feel like leader doesn't mean anything. If anything, it's just like all the dirty work of like ordering food. But also I always would tell my members, like, I'm not here to tell you about the Bible, like, and like preach to you. Go to P. Danny for that. Go to P. Don, P. Day, anyone else. But I'm just here to walk with you, especially in college. But I do think becoming a new Christian was pretty hard. And I feel like not even new Christian, just a Christian is always like that path of like, it's the ups and downs. But I feel like that gives me a lot of peace knowing it's not always like a straight line up.
Yeah.
But yeah.
What are some, because you mentioned like how your values have changed,
Yeah.
right? What are some ways that God has challenged your like previous non-Christian values or perspectives?
Right. So freshman year, just wanted to have fun. I wanted to join a lot of different clubs that are obviously not religious. And to me, I always knew I wanted community, but then I turned out on Emmaus. But I feel like that was like a big value of having like that Christ-like heart, of trying to mirror Jesus in that way, and things like challenging worldly wants like gossiping or like all these things that like honestly I'm still juggling with, that will always, I think everyone can deal with it. But yeah, I feel like these challenges are more, I don't know. It's just a lot.
Yeah. It's part of the walk. It's part of like the process of like sanctification, right? Yeah. So it feels like you've really grown a lot, changed a lot, I guess, through just like these past few years, through like getting to know Jesus, getting to know a Christian community.
Right.
If you had to like say one, I guess, big lesson or thing that I guess you would share with the like, what is a big lesson you think that you've gained from your testimony that you would want to share with the people, I guess, or just like anyone that hears your testimony?
Honestly, I feel like the biggest thing would be knowing that the little coincidences, the moments of like, is this fate, is just God's timing. Obviously, there's a way to differentiate it, but I think that especially entering the post-grad scaries, but like even throughout my almost 3-4 years of like being Christian, that I feel like knowing that God's in control has brought so much peace over my life, especially all the things that happened in the past as well, just knowing that it all worked out. I'm still here, like all those like maybe low moments, even like the good moments, that it all was through God, honestly, and that truly his timing is just really perfect. I feel like if God brought me Emmaus like another year, or like even now, that it would just look so different. Or even if I started going to like youth group in high school and like started committing to that, it would just be really different. But I feel like the way everything worked out was just so seamless. And yeah, even like the people he brought into my life to make an influence, like any mentors or like all the little dinners of talking about testimonies, it all was like really perfect. And I feel like that's only because of God.
Yeah, I love that. Every single moment, even the moments that were hard,
Right.
led and contributed to you coming to him and to being on that,
And even like
journey.
Future opportunities too. Like even like joining leadership and like Peter Wu coming up to me in Georgia to join AV, like all these moments. And I feel like especially worrying lately a lot about like my future, I also know like everything will work out, or every opportunity that's presented, he's doing that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess that can kind of segue into talking about kind of, I mean, we talked a lot about your past
Yeah.
and about how you've grown, but let's talk a little bit about like where you are at now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, what's going on in your faith life now?
So I think I touched on it before, but sophomore year was pretty good moment. First time leading. I started getting a lot more involved. I started getting involved in AV my sophomore year too. I think Pem Photo as well, because PJ told me during Georgia. I think Georgia was such a big moment
It was
where
a catalyst.
it was a canon event.
Yes.
Yeah, so I definitely feel like sophomore year was good. But then I think end of sophomore year, junior year was when I really had to reconsider and question like where I'm at without everyone carrying me. I do feel like although I love the community, but obviously faith is individual. And I do think that while I'm so grateful for everyone, that I had to learn what my relationship with God was, just him and I. And that included a lot of prayers. Honestly, I'm still going through it. I think it's been pretty hard, but strange enough, I have this like weird trust in my heart where I know he'll take care of everything. But I do think it's hard to have that in my head where I'm trying to be logical sometimes. But my heart is there, but up here, it's not like equating. But yeah, I feel like I still need to work on my discipline personally. I think reading the Bible, like expanding, it's who knows if I'll get to it by this year, but I do think little things like that has been a pretty difficult. I feel like other people have their foundation, kind of know like the deep history of the Bible, but I feel like at times that made me feel guilty too, especially like as a leader and like having whatever that leader status as like the younger, as my faith was still developing, was pretty confusing in my head of like how I'm expected to lead people, but I'm still honestly worse than them at times, like in my knowledge and in my walk. But I do think a lot has been trying to mirror him in that way, trying to not become worldly, and still, that's why I'm so grateful for community too, though. Like Bernice, like my roommate and someone who I grew up with, has been such a strong foundation, and like my inner circles just have been really like reassuring me, and that's what I'm really grateful for right now.
Yeah. And I think I want that to also be like an encouragement, because I know a lot of people, like I've talked to other people at time who also like struggle with like, oh, they don't feel like they have the head knowledge, or like even people who like didn't grow up Christian like you, who like don't have the like the kid Bible stories.
Right.
But like, yeah, I feel like hearing from you, like being in community, really learning that serving is just walking with people and like taking it at your own pace, and that like, you know, I think that's like, those are really good encouragements for anyone kind of going through a similar thing.
Right.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, right, it's like, it's all just part of God's journey. It's not a race. Yeah.
So hopefully, yeah. But that's been, I think, the main part, especially, I feel like after I graduate, I'll have to refocus without all the Emmaus serving. But I do think I'm also really thankful that God's using me in the ways to serve, not in worship. But in little moments of like, I really enjoy like AV, which is something I never thought I would get into. But moments like that, or even the PEM kids, sometimes they're saying better, they know the Bible more than I do. I'm like, y'all got it. So moments like that too. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So since you are graduating now and looking towards the future, what do you think that looks like? Do you have any thoughts? I mean, you still have plenty of time. Don't worry. But
I need more time, but
but yeah, I guess what are your thoughts right now? Where are you at?
a lot of anxiety. I think everyone in Emmaus is calling me old, which is so crazy. But
it is crazy. You're not old.
all the young adults I met at PEM were like, "You're a senior now." I'm like, "Yeah." But I think I've been trying to navigate that, and to me, I love PEM. I feel like, especially that kind of being the only church that I'm very familiar with, I could see myself investing a lot in the future, but also part of me is like, do I want to explore other routes too? But I recently joined the PEM Missions Committee with
Global Missions?
Yeah, Global Missions Committee with Kristen leading it. And I think me going to Georgia since freshman year, and for the youth group, I went to Fresno with you.
Yes, we did.
The PYC missions.
And then
I went to Syracuse. Yeah, which is, I don't know, youth group missions are different, but but I do think a part of me has like a little heart for future missions, and I think it's pretty scary. But I feel like
longer term missions?
maybe like I would be very willing if I'm called and financially good to go, you know? So
you heard it here first?
Yeah.
Or maybe you heard it many times before, I don't know.
So I think I would love to explore that route in the future, but I feel like I'm also very scared, or I don't know if I'm truly called, or if that's just a want, honestly, at the end of the day. So we'll see what opportunities arise in the future, but people at Emmaus have been saying I should be a pastor, which is absolutely crazy. No offense to all the pastors at PEM. But personally, I feel like people are projecting onto me. But yeah, I feel like for the future at least, that's why I wanted to join things like PEM Media or like staying in AV, because I still want to be grounded. I still want to be held accountable to still come out. Like, I feel like since my freshman year, I saw a lot of people who graduated from Emmaus and Rutgers who I haven't seen much. And to me, I hope they come back, or I hope they go somewhere. I don't know where they are right now, but I do think I would really want to still come out to church. And I feel like that's where my parents and my mom are kind of like, oh, it's just a phase. It's just a club. Like, I think the real test will be post-grad, which I'm excited for, but nervous for.
Yeah.
But also knowing things will work out, hopefully.
Yeah. I think you are one of very few Emmaus people who serve in at PEM in non-Emmaus PEM ways.
Yeah.
Do you think you'd share a little bit about that? Because I think that's something that we want to promote more of at Emmaus, right? So yeah, can you share kind of about that?
Yeah, but I feel like they're all so different. They're literally, and the time commitments, that's what made me really want to join, was that they're not too time consuming. Like, for example, being a leader on Emmaus, that's honestly 7 days every single day. But at least for here, obviously young adults, families are working. So things like AV, I feel like being in the booth is my little bubble. Like, the days I'm on, no one can see me. I love it. I'm still in the back. I think that was my first time. Because, when people worship, their hands are up. Some of their hands are very up in the sky, which is great. But to me, I was really anxious as a newcomer and a new believer. I was the this one, the this stuff. And I still am, honestly, sometimes. But in the booth was where I first, really felt worship and feeling safe to do so, which I don't think many people know. But yeah, I feel like especially the young adults and the families who reached out, and honestly, without them, I wouldn't have done it without that push. Peter telling me during Georgia, oh, you do media? How about this? Or Peter literally placing a camera in my hands to take pictures. I feel like that unlocked a love for photography in the church too. And things like PEM Kids, the children, honestly, I would have wanted to do it anyway, but also Peter and Grace were so accommodating to that too. And PEM Media, since I do media team for Emmaus, I knew I wanted to continue that, and especially it being close to my future hopeful career. But yeah, I think especially getting to know all these young adults and these families and they're so open to getting to know me. I'm like, me? Thanks. But yeah, I feel like the reason also what helped me get to this point in my faith is like the people who encouraged me, the little meals I got, and like I don't think they would ever know like a simple meal could help make me feel comfortable in the church. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that's such a great encouragement.
Yeah.
I think like a lot of young adults and families and just community in general, like we are one church. It is
Right.
not like Emmaus and Pem,
Yeah.
right? It's like we're one church.
Yeah.
And so being able to like feed into one another, pour out into one another, I think
Yeah.
that's just, I think your kind of experience with that is a great
Yeah.
testament to like the power of
Yeah.
the church.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
like because of that, like I brought like new like freshmen into Pen Photo, for example, and like they're gonna do great and things like that. But
Yeah. Passing it forward, right?
I guess I think P. Danny always taught that, and at least that was like one of the key things he said for leadership. Like it'll be passed forward. I feel
Yeah.
like the fruit of like house church too, seeing like my members sophomore year become leaders, then they are having their members. It's just like everyone's connected.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is really very heartwarming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Do you think you have kind of like on the topic of Emmaus and since you're like a senior, you've been in the you've been around the block
A little bit.
a little bit, you know? Do you have like I don't know about advice or just guess like things that you have like learned at Emmaus or like wish you knew going into Emmaus or anything like that
Yeah.
for some of our Emmaus listeners? So we're probably
Yeah.
gonna have more Emmaus listeners on this one.
Yeah, I personally, I'm the type of person where I do a lot because I'm weak.
can't say no.
I can't say no. I truly can't, and it's a bad problem of mine. But I also want to be busy. We'll see how long that lasts. But I do think, although I feel like it's so, I feel guilty sometimes for not serving, which is kind of tricky with church, because it's like I could serve this way, but also I think I could have invested more in like what I wanted to do in my future, because I was undecided for a year and a half, and that brought so much anxiety my first half of my college duration. But I think honestly, I feel like college is such a great time where, let's be real, we don't have money, you know? We're not having like full-blown careers. But I always said to myself that I don't have money, but I have time to give, which is why I wanted to go crazy and like honestly do a lot that I can, because I had the time. I can't tithe crazy. I can't like invest in whatever, but I always had the time to do it. So like my summers, I'm giving that all to God, because although I could maybe take a job, maybe take an internship, at least like this, I'm not gonna regret serving ever. I will regret in getting burnt out, but in the end, like everything worked out. Like those little moments of like me feeling anxious, but I always knew I had the time to give. So my thought process like, why not just do it? But I do think there is a certain like bubble where you consume too much into church life, especially as a new Christian, where it's like a whole new like world kind of, and like so many things you can do. So I think just in moderation, and like I wish I knew back then to like kind of it's okay to take a step back at times.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm learning now. But yeah, I feel like I see like the new leaders and they're like piling on a lot. I'm like, that was like me, but
That's how you get burnt
That's
out.
how you can get burnt out. But
Yeah.
honestly, I feel like even burnt out is like such a loose word that gets like thrown out everywhere. But I feel like I never truly got burnt out. I was tired. My physical body was tired from EMP. But I do think I always found joy in it, and like that's how I knew I could handle it, and like how kind of honestly God equipped me to continue going.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
like really such a blessing.
Yeah. So yeah, I feel like if you have the time, why not give it? you know? Like, what else would that time be going into for the most part?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess speaking of Emmaus, speaking of the future, do you have any hopes for Emmaus, like for the students themselves, for the group, for the community, anything? What are kind of your hopes for Emmaus going forward?
I mean, honestly, Emmaus now is so different. I don't even know, honestly, like what, 7 years ago also what it looked like. But at least for now, I think it has like so much potential. Like we are, I think, one of the biggest probably orgs. Honestly, don't fact check me on that. But at least Emmaus now, I think our first one maybe hit like 250 students. Obviously, the next weeks died down a lot. But I feel like there's so much potential with it. And now, like every other person did not grow up in the church, was the church, is maybe grew up in the church, but doesn't even have their own relationship with God, right? And I feel like you can't even assume people grew up in church anymore. And the way they bring out their friends, like the circle is so big. And I feel like even like, let's be real, diversity-wise, we could expand on that too. But I feel like, especially for the non-Christians, like, I hope they don't do it while community brings them out, I think I really want them to just be curious. And, like, I even remember one of my freshman or sophomore year, I sat P. Danny down for 2 hours and asked him, I had a notes that would accumulate all questions of, like, you know, like the typical, like, why is there suffering in the world? Like all these random questions that I had no idea, which obviously will come out through like more discipline later on. But I remember I just sat him down because I was just so curious about like, what is this book, you know?
Yeah.
What are their values? How did it happen? So I feel like my hopes would be just for Emmaus to thrive. And we have new interns now, like Nikki and Dan. Future, I don't even know how the process would work. I think we're even changing the leadership structure so much because it's too much to handle just for P. Danny. So even us leaders, like we're trying to accommodate that, trying to match each changing basis of each year. But I think just for mainly the new believers and honestly just for all of Emmaus to just be curious, especially in college. Like it could be such a trap. I feel like in any group of circle, you could just be in your own bubble, even on a big campus. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that's such a great encouragement.
Yeah.
Like, especially to like, yeah, I love that story about how you went to P. Danny. Yeah, I think just an encouragement, like you have leaders, you know, the leaders might not have all the answers, but like they are there for a reason, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's such a good encouragement to be curious.
Exactly. And even like my first house church was with Hannah Yi, Tongju, and Eddie. And it was really small. And I think compared to the other house churches, I don't know if they felt discouraged, honestly. I never talked to them about it, but I feel like that was such a pivotal point for me too. Like we read Prodigal Son. That's the only Bible story I will know inside and out because of that house church. But I feel like I think the leaders also, they might feel discouraged sometimes or like overwhelmed, and even trying to talk to one person versus like 10 different people on Emmaus, it makes such a big difference. But yeah.
Yeah, you never know how God is moving in to touch whoever. Yeah, I love that. But yes, now kind of as we approach the end of our conversation, how can we, the church, pray for you, Jen Kim?
At least for me, I think I just want to I know it sounds weird, but like kind of relearn my relationship with God without the serving sometimes. I feel like I based my, not value, but like where I'm at right now based on like my heart for serving, but I also want to have like the motivation and to have that, honestly, curiosity more, to honestly bring it back. Like, I think my big fear would be, and I could see it happening in the future, of like me getting comfortable. And I really don't want to be comfortable. And I think I just pray God will continue to challenge me. Maybe not too much, maybe a nice decent amount. But for him to continue challenging me, just so I just want to learn more. But even though my motivation might not be there sometimes, I guess another prayer request would just be for Emmaus. Especially, I don't know where it's gonna head out after this year, but I think it could have so many more fruits and just a lot more hands. Yeah, and for them to merge with PEM a little more. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, so you heard it here. Pray for Jen if you're listening to this. And also, if you have any questions for Jen, part of PEMCAST is that we want to be connecting the different parts of our church. So if you have questions about Jen, I'm sure she would be happy to.
Always.
Yeah, you can. Where can they find you usually?
My Instagram, literally anywhere. Ask, just you can find me.
Yeah, she's everywhere.
I'm an open book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, reach out to Jen. Say hi to her. It was great hearing your story. I love digging into your mind a little bit. Any last words for the people?
I feel like just having more trust in God, I think makes such a big difference in like releasing any anxieties. I feel like no matter what like life stage you're at, you're always gonna be anxious about something. You're gonna be worrying about the next thing. And I might be being hypocritical by saying this, but I do think, everything will always work out through God's timing.
Through God's timing. Love it. And I think that's a wrap.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for listening.
Bye.
Bye.